In the past few episodes of History Traveler, we've been walking the ground here on Vimy Ridge, talking about the battle that took place, kicking off on April 9th of 1917, where 4 divisions of the Canadian Corps stormed the heights of this ridge on the northern flank of the Battle of Arras. Right now, I'm standing in Canadian Cemetery number 2. And as you walk among all of these headstones, well, it's not just Canadians who are buried here. There are a lot of British soldiers who are buried here who lost their lives when they held the line before the Canadians took over in the fall of 1916. This isn't the only cemetery, though. There are, I don't know how many cemeteries all along Vimy Ridge that hold the remains of the men who fought here in 1917. As a matter of fact, from this cemetery right here, I can look and see another one. And today, we're going to visit a few of those cemeteries that are quite unique. Much is made about the artillery fire that was seen at the Battle of the Somme, and there's no doubt it was just on another level. Here at Vimy Ridge, that is going to be ramped up even more. So in preparation for the infantry assault that's going to take place over this ground, well, the artillery formed kind of a giant semicircle around Vimy Ridge, and this place got pulverized. There's counter battery fire. There's targeting of German fortifications and of trench systems. And it is going to be unlike anything that the guys here had ever seen before. Just to give you an idea of what we see here at Vimy as far as the artillery, there's 1 heavy gun for every 18 meters and 1 field gun for every 9. In comparison, that's 3 times the number of heavy guns that was seen at the Battle of the Somme and double the power of field guns. So there's going to be a pre-invasion bombardment that is just going to rip through this area. Now, I mentioned that we were going to be taking a look at some very unique cemeteries today here in the Vimy Ridge area. But first, I wanted to talk a little bit about craters, like this big old crater right here. One of the defining elements in the Arras sector and in Vimy Ridge in particular was the tunneling and mining operations that took place beneath the surface, both before and during the battle. There was a war that was happening beneath our feet. And this crater that we are looking at is evidence of that battle that took place beneath the surface. These tunneling operations were designed for different purposes. Of course, you wanted to get under the enemy lines. In some cases, it was to blow up the enemy lines. There was a certain type of mine explosion that they would do where they would try and bury the men on the other side. And then there were tunneling operations beneath the tunnels to try and blow up your enemy's tunnel. So, I mean, I can't even imagine what this must have been like. But this is the Broad Marsh crater. And the Germans called it the Schleswig-Holstein Trichter. It was created on May 21st of 1916 when the Germans detonated an explosion to try and push the British line back. This is when the British occupied this part of the line. And there was a German with the 5th Company Foot Guard Regiment who described the moment. Here's what he says. "A severe shock shook the earth, and a wave-like motion began beneath our feet. There was a great noise from deep down. Then slowly, the earth in front of us began to heave upwards into what looked like a great mountain. Suddenly, it burst open, and great flames, crowned with a whitish-gray smoke cloud, leapt upwards. Gradually, the smoke cleared, and like a shower of meteors, clods of clay and lumps of chalk rained down on us. It was a man-made earthquake, gigantic, dreadful to behold. I cannot even imagine what it must have looked like to see that thing, much less to be on the receiving end of it." Now, all up and down the front line here, you see these craters that have, forever pockmarked the ground here on Vimy Ridge. And the Canadians made some interesting use of a few of them after the battle. They turned them into a burial ground. All right, well, we have left Broad Marsh Crater and moved not too far away to another crater that was set off by the British. This is Zivy Crater. Now, before we get into this, I want to make something perfectly clear. I don't want people to think that I'm just like some uber smart guy. I'm getting my knowledge from other people. So in this particular case, I've benefited a lot from the old Frontline podcast by Paul Reed. Paul Reed is a legendary historian. I would consider him to be like the godfather of World War I history. And a lot of the information that I'm getting today and the places that I'm going are due to his podcast. So anyway, with that being said, Zivy Crater, again, this is a British mine crater that was detonated by the 181st Tunneling Company of the Royal Engineers. They had a 3,000-pound charge that they set off on the 12th of June, 1916. So this is when the British would have held this part of Vimy Ridge. And a 3,000-pound charge, it's not the largest charge that was ever set off when you compare it to maybe some of the mine explosions on the Somme battlefront. But if you were here in this part of the line, it probably doesn't matter how big or small it was. Like if it's a big explosion or a small explosion, I would not discriminate between the two. I wouldn't be picky. I don't want to be on top of either. But anyway, this mine was dug under the German lines and then again set off on the 12th of June 1916. And then after the battle kind of moved on and this area was cleared, well, the Canadians ended up burying some of their dead right here in this spot. And you'll notice there are no headstones. This is kind of like a mass grave. Now, even though this is a mass grave, we actually know who is buried here. They just don't have any headstones. So here you can see on the front of this monument, it reads, "In this crater are buried 48 Canadian soldiers whose names are recorded on this wall, 2 unidentified Canadian soldiers and 3 unidentified soldiers of the forces of the Empire." So if we look over here, you can see the names of these men who were buried in this crater. I'm seeing a lot of dates of April 9th. So that was the opening day of the Battle of Vimy Ridge and the larger Battle of Arras. Let's see, a lot of 19th Battalion guys, 21st Battalion guys. If we move over here, Here I'm seeing some 18th Battalion guys. The 18th Battalion, that was the spearhead of the advance here in this sector. Yeah, here's another 18th Battalion guy right here. Yeah. So here are the names of the men who were buried right here in this crater. Now, this cemetery was not originally called Zivy Crater Cemetery. It was originally called CB1. So the Canadian Corps Burial Company had a specific system for, I guess, or a specific nomenclature for their cemeteries. So C stood for Canadian, for the Canadian Corps. Then there were the letters A, B, C, and D. Those were to match up with the 4 different divisions of the Canadians. So A was the 1st division, B was the 2nd division, C was the 3rd, D was the 4th, and then the 1 was just the number of the cemetery. So this is CB1, so we are in the 2nd division sector right here. And most of the men who are buried in this crater, again, this was right along the German lines where this mine was detonated, probably died really quick in the assault and were recovered from no man's land after the battle. All right, got another one that we're going to go to called Lichfield Crater. Well, we have made our way over now to Lichfield Crater Cemetery, and if you look over here on the right side of the gate, you can see etched in stone there, it says CB2A, and then in Roman numerals 1917. So again, that's Canadian Corps. B is for the 2nd Division, and then this is Cemetery 2A. Why it's 2A and not 2, I'm not exactly sure. But if we go through the gate here, well, here you can see the remnants of another mine crater that was blown here in the Vimy Ridge sector. Now, this was not during the Battle of Vimy Ridge with the Canadians, and it wasn't a British mine. This was a German mine that was blown up in April of 1916. The Canadians would move in the fall of 1916. And there are some interesting burials here. Now, at the other crater cemetery, we didn't have any headstones. Here at Lichfield, we have one. It is to a Private Albert Stubbs, who, as you can see, was in the South Lancashire Regiment. He died the 30th of April, 1916, at the age of 25. So again, that's when the British would have been holding the line here. And we actually know a little bit about his story. He worked in a cotton factory, joined up in September of 1914, so that would have been soon after the war began, was wounded up around Ypres in October of 1915, and the records say that his body went missing in a mine explosion. So we can assume that it was this mine explosion that his body was lost in, and they put up a grave marker here to remember him. Now, just like at Zivy Crater, here at Lichfield Crater, they don't have, again, any headstones. This is a mass grave, but we do have the names of the men who are buried here. So, for example, we have G. Davies, who was in the 24th Battalion. died the 25th of April. Here's a T. Copeland, who died on the opening assault on Vimy Ridge on the 9th of April. He was in the 16th Battalion. And then here's where we get a little bit more information about this cemetery. It says, in this crater are buried 41 Canadian soldiers whose names are recorded on this wall. 11 unidentified Canadian soldiers, 1 unidentified of the South Lancashire Regiment, 4 unidentified soldiers of the forces of the Empire, and 1 unknown Russian soldier. You might be asking yourself, what in the world is a Russian soldier doing out over here on the Western Front? Well, the Germans, when they started the construction of the Hindenburg Line to withdraw and kind of shore up their forces and create more of a defense in depth, well, they brought over Russian POWs to do work on the Hindenburg Line defenses. And how this guy got here, don't know. Maybe he escaped from the German lines and then came over here and was killed. On Paul's podcast, he recounted a story of a couple Russian POWs who got out of the German lines, and when they got to the British lines, well, they were speaking Russian. British didn't know if they were German or not, and shot and killed them. But here in this plot, well, you have Canadian soldiers, a few British soldiers, and a Russian. As you were looking at all of these names, well, your eye might catch one that is a little bit different from the others. Buried here in this cemetery is Ellis Wellwood Sifton, and if you see behind his name there it has the initials VC. That stands for Victoria Cross. For Americans who may not be familiar, that's kind of like the equivalent to our Medal of Honor. Sifton was one of 4 Canadian soldiers who was awarded the Victoria Cross during the Battle of Vimy Ridge. He was 25 years old. As you can see, he was in the 18th Battalion of the Canadian Infantry and was in C Company. And what led to him being awarded the Victoria Cross is, as the Canadians went over the top, you have German machine gun fire from those who had survived the barrage that is sweeping the field. Sifton jumps up, rushes forward, and leaps into the German trenches, gets to the German gun crew, knocks them out, uses his bayonet to kill this machine gun crew, and then another German party was rushing down the trenches to take out Sifton. He uses his bayonet with them, is using his rifle as a club to fight them off until help arrives. Unfortunately, help arrived a little bit too late, and he was killed in the fighting. And he is buried right here in this cemetery. All right, well, there you go. Something a little different. The crater cemeteries here on Vimy Ridge. And again, if you enjoyed the history of this and learning something a little bit new, well, then again, I'll stress that you need to check out Paul Reed's podcast, The Old Front Line. This is where I learned all of this stuff. And you can also support his work on Patreon. He also has a YouTube channel that is worth checking out. But anyway, that was one more little piece of the puzzle here at Vimy Ridge and the overall Battle of Arras.